58 minutes after Julian Harrow gave a homeless mother the right to use a corporate apartment for 30 days. Along with an unlimited payment card, his phone vibrated. The first transaction was worth $3,286. Location: Roxbury Family Learning Cooperative. Not a grocery store. Not clothing. Not a hotel or a resellable electronic item. Julian looked at the name of the establishment appearing on the screen, his finger pausing between the coffee cup and the glass table. In his mind, every possibility took the shape of a mistake. But Julian Harrow had never truly done anything without keeping the right to doubt for himself. So, stay until the end of the story. That payment did not only reveal what Asha had done when first given the power to choose, it also forced Julian to face a truth hidden within the very spreadsheets bearing his signature. Before continuing, let us know where you're listening from in the comments. If this story makes you think of someone who once quietly helped you, hit like so it can reach more people. And subscribe to the channel to accompany new stories every evening. Nearly a day before that transaction appeared, Julian Harrow was still the man business magazines called living proof of a new generation of American success. 38 years old, CEO of Harrow Urban Holdings, Julian owned apartment complexes, office towers, and redevelopment projects stretching from Boston to Philadelphia. The penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor had 3 bedrooms, but only 1 bed that had ever been used. In the refrigerator were water bottles lined up straight, a few boxes of chef-prepared food, and nothing bearing the handprint of a child. His father, Curtis Harrow, used to say poverty was not just a circumstance. According to him, it was a habit. Curtis grew up in a cramped apartment in Roxbury, wore jackets passed down from a cousin, and worked from the age of 13. He spent the rest of his life making sure no one could remind him he had once been in need. His harshness did not come from never having known poverty. It came from the shame of once having belonged to it. You should only help someone who has already helped themselves. Julian remembered his father's voice exactly because Curtis repeated that line everywhere. In the car, at the dinner table, and before fundraisers where he handed over a large check and then asked the communications department to photograph it from the right angle. Julian inherited the company, the money, and that same suspicion. He could approve millions of dollars for a program if every clause fit neatly into a spreadsheet. But he had never given a person the right to choose without keeping for himself a way to take it back. On an evening in January 2027, Julian went to Harriet House in Roxbury to attend a community meeting about a new project of the corporation. The red brick building had once been a small library, later renovated into a childcare space, evening classrooms, and a common room for families in need of support. In the hallway were photos of groups of students across many generations, posters about Black history in Boston, and a bulletin board full of job notices with curled edges. The meeting ran longer than expected. Residents did not object to fixing up old buildings. They objected to the fact that every time a street became cleaner, the people who had lived there the longest began to no longer afford to stay. Julian listened with the calm trained into him in boardrooms. He took notes, nodded, and promised to look into it. Claire Dorsey, his executive assistant, sat beside him, marking down the points that needed to be passed to the legal department. Close to 10 at night, the last chairs were being stacked. The smell of cold coffee and floor-cleaning solution mixed in the air. Julian was walking toward the door when he heard the sound of a plastic chair scraping lightly on the tile floor. In the reading room, a girl about 7 years old was asleep on 2 chairs pushed together. She wore a yellow sweater, dark blue uniform pants, and still had one strap of a backpack on. Both hands were tucked under her cheek. Her sneakers sat neatly beneath her, toes pointing toward the door. There was no blanket. A woman's jacket was draped over her, just barely enough to cover from shoulder to knee. At the far end of the room, Asha Bennett was wiping down each table. She wore a faded gray fleece, her hair tied up neatly under a dark wrap. Beside her feet was a bag of cleaning supplies, a nearly empty spray bottle, and a blue children's bag carefully zipped shut. Every time she passed her daughter, Asha slowed down, checked that the jacket still covered her fully before continuing her work. Julian stood outside the door longer than necessary. He had seen homeless people before train stations, under awnings, and beside entrances with warm air vents. But the scene in front of him did not resemble the image his mind was used to categorizing. There was no sign asking for money, no pleading, only a mother cleaning the room her child had been allowed to sleep in. Asha noticed him through the reflection on the glass door. She set down the cloth, stepped toward her daughter, then stopped, as if afraid too strong a movement would wake her. "We'll leave before the center opens." Her voice was low, clear, and carried no tone of begging. After saying that, she bent down to pick up the shoes, placed them closer to the leg of the chair, then pulled the edge of the jacket back over the child's shoulder. Julian looked at the backpack still on her. The zipper was closed tight. A small house-shaped keychain swayed beside it, the paint on its roof almost entirely worn off. "Do you work here?" Asha glanced toward the end of the hallway, where the manager was gradually turning off the rows of lights. On her face was the caution of someone who knew that just one wrong sentence could make even this last shelter disappear. "I clean in the evenings. She's not bothering anyone." Julian looked down at the old ID card clipped to the outside of the blue bag. The ink was smudged at the corner, but the name was still readable. Asha Bennett. He had seen that name somewhere before, next to an asset code, a personnel cost column, and a line of restructuring proposal highlighted in yellow. By close to midnight, that name still sat in Julian's mind like a piece of paper clipped into the wrong file. Asha had woken Maya by placing a hand on her shoulder, light enough that the child only shifted, then pulled the jacket closer. She waited a few seconds before removing the backpack strap from the small arm that bore a red mark. The motion was practiced, as if she had many times moved her daughter from a sofa to a bus, from a church pew to the guest room of an acquaintance, without being allowed to let the child fully wake. Maya opened her eyes, then immediately sat up. She did not ask where she was. Her first question was what time it was, because at only 7 years old, she already knew that every place the two of them stayed had a moment when they had to leave. Asha said it was still early, helped her put on her shoes, then smoothed out the yellow sweater. The cuffs were worn, but clean. The small braids were still tied neatly, even though she had just been sleeping on the chairs. In the blue bag, Asha kept everything needed to make Maya's life look normal the next morning. A spare uniform, a toothbrush, a lunchbox with stars on it, a wide-tooth comb, hair lotion, 2 pairs of socks, and a homework folder wrapped in a waterproof bag. Asha's own things were fewer, kept in a shopping bag that had been folded and refolded until it was soft as cloth. A shirt for interviews, black pants, identification papers, and a pair of low-heeled shoes she only wore when she needed someone else to believe her life was still in order. For 11 weeks straight, the two of them had never slept out on the sidewalk. That made them harder to see, not less real in their circumstances. Some nights they stayed on Denise's sofa, in an apartment where 3 children already shared one room. Some nights they slept at the church after a food distribution, Asha laying her jacket under Maya's back so the old carpet would not rub against her skin. When there was nowhere else, Harriet House let them stay in the reading room on condition that every trace be cleared away before 7 in the morning. The previous summer, Boston released the 2026 count showing 3,674 people experiencing homelessness on the night of the survey, down from 5,506 people in 2025. 3% were recorded as unsheltered, and no family was identified in that condition on the night of the count. But a count taken over one night could still fail to see families cycling between friends' sofas, community rooms, and informal shelters. Asha had never used the word homeless in front of Maya, not because she was ashamed. She feared that once the child called what was happening by its right name, she would begin to see every door as something that could close. She still took her daughter to her old school every morning, even when it meant switching 2 buses. If food was scarce, Asha said she had already eaten at work. If Maya asked why they were staying at someone else's house, she said families need to help each other. Every morning, she brushed her daughter's hair, packed the lunchbox, and checked her homework, as if that steadiness could build a wall between Maya's childhood and the instability of the adult world. Before losing their housing, Asha had worked as assistant manager at Douglas Court. She collected rent, handled the repair schedule, checked invoices, and knew the names of most of the children across the 3 buildings. When an elderly resident forgot to renew assistance paperwork, she reminded them ahead of the deadline. When a mother working the night shift could not meet the plumber, Asha kept the key and waited. The job did not pay much, but it came with a 1-bedroom apartment at an employee rate. That was enough for Maya to have a bed, for Asha to have an address on job applications, and for both of them to know where they would wake up. Then Harrow Urban Holdings acquired the property. The new management company determined that Asha's position overlapped with the resident services department at the central office. She received a severance payment, a letter of reference, and 30 days to leave the apartment. Asha used it to pay for a motel room, because the apartments she found all required first month's rent, a deposit, and proof of current income. Every safe night at the motel took away part of the money needed to rent a home. She sent 3 emails to the company, one asking to be transferred to another position, one asking to keep renting the apartment for 60 more days. The last one simply asking whether Maya could keep receiving mail at the management office until the two of them had a new address. All three received form responses. Julian learned all of this after texting Claire to check the name on the old ID card. Close to midnight, his phone received a 47-page file. On page 19 was the decision to terminate the assistant manager position at Douglas Court. At the bottom of the document, just above the line projecting savings of $68,400 per year, was Julian Harrow's electronic signature. That signature had been placed on a Tuesday at 4:17 in the afternoon. The work calendar showed Julian had signed 12 more documents in that same hour, between a call with the bank and a fundraising dinner at the Commonwealth Hotel. He did not remember reading the name Asha Bennett, did not remember the note stating that her apartment was tied to her job position. Even less did he remember asking what would happen to a single mother after 30 days of having to leave her home. Julian sat in the penthouse until nearly dawn, turning through page after page of the file. The black phrases kept their familiar detachment: operational optimization, elimination of redundant functions, staffing structure adjustment. Not a single line said Maya would begin sleeping with a backpack on her shoulders. No chart had a place to record how many times Asha had to wake her daughter before dawn, then clean the spot where the two of them had just been lying. The next morning, Julian called Claire before she arrived at the office. He asked her to keep the corporate apartment in South Boston free. It was the place the company used for specialists coming from other cities for short-term work, already stocked with a bed, blankets, a kitchen, a washing machine, towels, and basic food. Claire was silent for a few seconds when she heard the name of the person who would use it. She did not object, but asked how long this arrangement would last. 30 days. The number left Julian's mouth too easily. It was long enough to sound like help, yet still short enough for him to keep a clear ending in sight. Asha took the call while sitting on the number 23 bus. Maya had gone into class, and she was on her way to a hotel downtown for an interview for a housekeeping supervisor position. She had changed into her shirt in the bathroom at Harriet House before boarding the bus. The collar was slightly worn, but pressed flat with the shared iron in the laundry room. When Julian suggested meeting, Asha looked at her watch and said she only had 40 minutes before the interview. He met her outside a coffee shop on Washington Street. Asha did not step inside. She stood under the awning, both hands holding the strap of her bag, with the manner of someone who had learned not to let an unexpected meeting cost her any chance. Julian explained about the apartment and the 30-day period. Asha listened to all of it, without interrupting. Relief did not appear right away. The first thing that surfaced was suspicion. Why? Julian could have said the company was the reason she lost her job, could have apologized right there on the sidewalk and considered the apology enough. But part of him still had not accepted full responsibility. He had only seen his own signature, not yet seen the choices Asha had made afterward. Curtis's prejudice still lived in that hesitation. You need a stable place to start over. Asha understood that was not the whole truth. But Maya would be out of school in a few hours, and she did not have the privilege of refusing an open door just because the person opening it had not been fully honest with himself. She took the address, thanked him once, then walked toward the train station. That afternoon, Julian picked up the two of them at Harriet House. Maya sat still in the car, knees pressed together, her eyes moving from the tinted window to the leather seats, then back to her mother's face. Asha placed the blue bag between her daughter's legs, keeping one hand on the strap the whole ride. The other two bags sat in the trunk. Most of what had once belonged to them was still locked away in a storage unit in Dorchester, where the overdue fee had entered its third week. The apartment was brighter than anywhere Maya had slept in months. The living room had a gray sofa, a dining table with 4 chairs and framed pictures chosen so as not to unsettle anyone. In the kitchen were pots, pans, milk, eggs, bread, fruit, and an unopened box of cereal. Both bedrooms had clean sheets laid out. Maya walked into the smaller room. She touched the blanket, then set her backpack in the middle of the bed without unzipping it. Her shoes stayed on her feet. "Are we staying here till tomorrow, Mom?" Asha walked in, removed the backpack strap from her daughter's shoulder. 30 days, Maya repeated the number in her mind. She did not yet understand how long 30 days was, but understood it was more than one night. She took off her shoes, placed them side by side beneath the edge of the bed, toes pointing toward the door. In the living room, Julian opened the secondary phone already loaded with a virtual payment card issued in Asha's name. The card was valid for 24 hours, no limit, no secret code, no blocked categories. Asha read the instruction sheet twice. "What do you want?" Julian looked past her shoulder to where Maya stood beside the empty dresser, still not having taken a single item out of her backpack. I want to know what a person will do when money is no longer the thing holding them back. Asha folded the paper along its center crease, placed it into a small notebook, then sat down at the dining table. In front of her lay 30 days of safety. Behind her lay 11 weeks propped up by people who did not have much themselves either. She picked up a pen, wrote Maya's name at the top of the page, drew a line beneath it, then began to number the list. The first item was after-school childcare for Maya. Asha did not write clothing or an apartment. She also did not write food, even though for weeks the two of them's dinner had often been decided by whatever was left in someone else's refrigerator. The first thing she wrote was Roxbury Family Learning Cooperative. Next to it, the overdue fee and the date Maya could lose her spot if payment was not made by the next morning. With no one to pick up her daughter after school, Asha could not take a full-time job, could not attend a training that ran past 3 in the afternoon, could not promise an employer she would show up on time if every day she had to call and ask someone else to watch Maya for another 40 minutes. Childcare was the hinge holding every other door from falling shut. The second line was the storage unit in Dorchester. Inside, it was Maya's small bed, the cast iron pot left by Asha's mother, 2 boxes of family photos, summer clothes, school certificates, and a box of Christmas decorations that had been used since before Maya could walk. The fee was 3 weeks overdue. If not paid, Asha risked losing things that were not expensive but could never be bought back. The third line was the phone number that had been shut off the previous afternoon. Asha could still receive calls over the wireless network at Harriet House, but only while standing inside the building. 2 employers had left voicemails she did not hear until hours later. A landlord once said he would call back to schedule a viewing, then never called again. Asha did not know if he had changed his mind or simply could not reach her. When money was short, even silence became a bill. She kept writing: bus fare, document copying fees, shoes for Maya, and 2 sets of interview clothes. Each item had an estimated amount beside it. Asha did not write in order of what she wanted. She wrote in order of what would keep the two of them from returning to where they started once the 30 days ended. Maya sat at the other end of the table, eating cereal from a white bowl. She had taken off her jacket but was still in her uniform. Every so often she glanced toward the hallway, as if to make sure the 2 bags were still near the door. Julian left the apartment after explaining how to reach the front desk. He did not ask Asha what she would buy. At the very least, he believed himself generous enough not to ask. But as soon as the elevator doors closed, he opened the banking app before even reaching the ground floor. 15 minutes passed, no transaction. 30 minutes, still nothing. Julian sat in his car, answered 2 emails, then opened the app again. He reminded himself Asha needed time to think. Even so, the waiting let his mind fill the gap with old assumptions. Maybe she was figuring out how to transfer the money. Maybe she understood an unlimited card was worth more than small purchases and was preparing to use it before he could change his mind. Inside the apartment, Asha called the childcare center. She stood by the kitchen window so Maya would not hear clearly. The staff member confirmed her daughter's balance and explained the spot would be held if payment was completed before 9 the next morning. Asha asked if she could pay 4 weeks in advance. Then she asked whether a person could pay off the balance on another account if they knew the parents' and child's names. Denise had just taken a morning shift at a nursing home. If her son lost his childcare spot, Denise might have to miss her first day. Rochelle was on a trial period at a grocery store, her first paycheck not yet in. Her daughter also had an overdue balance. Both of them had carried Asha through weeks when no one else knew how far she was falling. Denise had given up her sofa for Maya and slept on the floor. Rochelle drove an extra 20 minutes each afternoon to pick up her daughter, even though the gas in her tank usually only lasted to the end of the week. Asha looked at the number on the screen. She could pay only for Maya. No one would blame her. Keeping every resource for her own child was the most reasonable thing to do. But the two of them's life had never been held up by a single person. It had been held together by small pieces that many women had split off from their own scarcity. Asha entered $3,286, checked the name of the facility 3 times, then pressed confirm. After that, she called the storage facility, the phone carrier, and the records office. The transactions that followed were smaller, each tied to a problem that had been delayed too long. On the other side of the city, Julian's phone lit up. Roxbury Family Learning Cooperative, $3,286. He looked up the name of the facility and found it was an after-school childcare program. His chest eased for a moment, then the suspicion returned in a different shape, too large an amount for one child. Too fast for a first decision. 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed again. $182 for phone service, $417 for the storage unit, $96 at the records copying office, $68 at a children's shoe store. Julian scrolled down, waiting for a luxury purchase to appear. Nothing like that came. Only small, practical numbers, arranged as if the person using the card did not think she had just been given the power to spend, but was only rebuilding a bridge before the road behind her collapsed. He called Claire, canceled his late afternoon meeting, then sent her the address of the childcare center. "Check on that first payment for me." Then Julian grabbed his jacket, stepped into the elevator. While back at the South Boston apartment, Asha knelt in front of Maya, pressing the peeling sole of a shoe back into place so her daughter could wear it for one more morning. Julian arrived at the Roxbury Family Learning Cooperative close to 4 in the afternoon. The building sat among a row of small shops, a low blue-painted fence out front, and children's handprints printed on the glass doors. Inside, nothing seemed to match the amount of money that had made him cancel his entire afternoon of work. No polished lobby, no elegant classrooms, only the smell of crayons, floor cleaner, and a snack being portioned onto paper plates. The person in charge was Mrs. Green, a woman in her 50s wearing red-framed glasses with a pencil tucked behind her ear. She looked at Julian's business card, then at the transaction screenshot on his phone. "The payment is valid," she said. Julian asked whether it had gone toward one account or several. Mrs. Green set the phone down on the desk without turning the screen toward him. "I can't share information about children or families with someone who isn't listed in the records." The refusal came gently but firmly. Julian was used to his name opening doors, shortening procedures, and making people search for an answer before he even finished a question. This time, that same name only made Mrs. Green pull her computer screen further away. She confirmed that Asha was the one who made the payment and that all the instructions were valid. Beyond that, she said nothing. Julian left the center with his suspicions still unanswered, but it was no longer as sharp as before. On the way back to South Boston, he passed a line of parents waiting to pick up their children. Someone in medical scrubs, someone still wearing a restaurant apron, a man snatching a few minutes of sleep on a chair while his daughter did homework beside him. They were not there because they liked depending on others. They were there because a few hours of childcare could decide whether a shift got completed or left unfinished. When Julian walked into the apartment, Asha was sitting at the dining table. Maya was coloring on the living room rug, her new shoes set beside her still stuffed with tissue paper. She wanted to wait until morning so the shoes would stay new longer. Julian set his phone on the table. I went to the center. Asha closed the notebook. On her face there was none of the shame of someone caught spending money wrongly. Only the caution of someone who had seen help get taken back once they used it differently from what the giver had wanted. She opened the waterproof bag, took out 3 receipts, then set them in front of him. The first name was Maya Bennett. The payment covered 4 weeks of after-school care, including snacks, homework hours, and late pickup for when Asha had an interview or training. The second name was Isaiah Coleman. The third name was Nia Brooks. Asha did not tell the story in the voice of someone trying to prove she was good. She only said what was necessary. Denise Coleman had once given up her sofa for Maya, sleeping on a thin mat on the floor herself. Rochelle Brooks had picked up Maya from school many times so Asha could go to interviews. Both women had just gotten jobs but had not yet received their first paycheck. If their children lost their childcare spots, those new jobs could disappear before they even began. "You could have kept that money for yourself," Julian said. After he said it, Asha looked at her daughter. Maya was carefully coloring in each tile of a roof, her small tongue poking out slightly in concentration. "I kept what was needed for my daughter first." She touched the receipt with Maya's name on it. Then her finger moved to the other 2. "But I didn't get here on my own." Asha did not call what she had done charity. In the notebook, beside the 2 payments, she had written 4 words, paying the help back. When Maya heard the names Denise and Rochelle, she stood up, ran into the bedroom, then came back with a piece of paper folded in 4. She opened it on the table. 3 women stood beneath a roof too small for them, their long arms touching. Below them were 3 children, each wearing a backpack. Julian pointed at the third woman. "Who is this?" Maya looked at her mother, then at the drawing. "The one who comes to get me when Mom can't make it in time." The answer was simpler than any lesson in ethics Julian had ever heard. A poor community did not survive because of one hero. It survived through the person who watched a child for 20 extra minutes, the person who left food in the fridge, the person who gave up the sofa and lay down on the floor. No one had extra to spare, yet they still cut from their own shortage so the person beside them would not fall all the way down. Julian's phone buzzed. Claire sent a short line. "I've opened the entire Douglas court file. The problem is bigger than we thought." Attached was the decision bearing his electronic signature, the cost spreadsheet, and 3 emails Asha had once sent, but that had never reached Julian's desk. He opened the first document right there at the dining table. The line terminating the assistant manager position sat between elevator maintenance costs and the landscaping budget. Beside it was the projected savings of $68,400 per year. Julian looked up. Asha was helping Maya fold the drawing back up, carefully smoothing out the crumpled edge of the paper. In the company's spreadsheet, Asha was just a deleted line. In this room, she was someone who had just used her first chance to keep 3 children from losing their seats one afternoon. Julian stood up from the table but did not leave the apartment. He walked to the window, looking at the low rooftops below, while Claire kept sending more pages of the file. Asha had been paid $3,920 in severance after tax. The cheapest motel room she found in the first week cost over $100 a night. Storage, bus fare, food, phone service, and application fees kept draining the account. The apartments she contacted required current income, first month's rent, a deposit, and sometimes a broker's fee as well. She was not rejected because of bad history. She was rejected because she had just lost the job that proved she could pay rent. The next morning, Julian went back to the office. Claire waited in the small conference room, 3 files in front of her and a spreadsheet already open. She did not use an accusing tone. She simply turned the screen toward him. According to HUD's standard FMR schedule for fiscal year 2026, the Boston-Cambridge-Quincy area had a rate of $2,476 per month for a 1-bedroom unit and $2,941 for a 2-bedroom unit. That was the official benchmark, not a luxury apartment. With less than $4,000 in severance, Asha could almost not simultaneously cover first month's rent, a deposit, childcare, food, and transportation. The trap was not in one big decision. It was in dozens of small amounts, each one seeming reasonable on its own, but stacked together forming a wall with no gap to climb through. Julian read the 3 emails Asha had once sent. She did not beg. She laid out dates, experience, and a repayment plan. The last email only asked for Maya to keep receiving mail at the management office while the 2 of them looked for a new address. All 3 letters had been answered with a preset template. That afternoon, Julian called together the executive team. He asked to pause the elimination of resident support positions and to set up a bridge fund for employees who lost housing tied to their jobs. The CFO, Martin Cole, placed both hands on the budget chart, then said the proposal would cut into the profits of the projects currently being restructured. "We can't run this company on whichever case happens to move you." Julian had once said lines close to that himself, which was exactly why he could not pretend Martin was the only one in the room with a problem. The first proposal was rejected, 5 votes against and 3 in favor. The board asked for 6 more months of study. 6 months was a comfortable stretch of time for someone sitting in a heated conference room. For a family that had just lost their address, it could be the entire distance from an apartment to a sofa, from a sofa to a reading room. Julian set down the profit analysis. He had the power to force the decision through as the largest shareholder, but using it meant accepting a lower profit target and facing investor backlash. Curtis had once taught him never to let emotion weaken a negotiation. This time, Julian voted through a 12-month pilot fund. Martin did not argue further. He simply closed his file, a small gesture, but enough for Julian to understand the fight was not over. By the end of the day, 2 investors requested an urgent call. One warned the company was setting a dangerous precedent. The other asked whether Julian intended to turn every staffing decision into a housing obligation. Julian did not answer with Asha's story. He sent back the numbers instead, rehiring costs, turnover rates, and the operational losses that came when people who knew the residents were replaced by a central department that did not know a single name in the building. For the first time, he did not use compassion as the opposite of profit. He pointed out that coldness had a cost too. Only the company had gotten used to pushing it onto someone else's life. That evening, Julian returned to the South Boston apartment with a new document. Asha was sitting at the dining table, the receipts arranged neatly. Maya was doing homework on the rug, her new shoes on her feet. Julian placed the document in front of Asha. It was a commitment extending her right to use the apartment until she could sign a suitable lease of her own, with no requirement to appear before the media, no obligation to work for Harrow Urban Holdings attached. Then he opened the Douglas court decision on his phone and set his own signature between the two of them. I approved this. Asha looked at the screen. Her eyes stopped on the line, terminating the apartment tied to employment, not on the savings figure. That day was a Thursday. Julian knew the file had been signed on a Tuesday, but Asha was not talking about the day he signed it. She was talking about the day the letter was slid under the apartment door, when Maya had just come home from school and was sitting on the floor cutting houses out of colored paper. Asha had spent almost an hour trying to figure out how to tell her daughter they were about to move without making Maya believe she had done something wrong. "You remember it as a signature," she said. "I remember it as the day my daughter started asking whether her things needed to stay packed in the bag." Julian sat down in the chair across from her. For the first time since stepping into the apartment, he did not know what to say that would let him keep his place as the one who held the power to decide. Every apology felt too light. Every promise sounded like another way of taking back control. Asha did not need a billionaire feeling guilty. She needed enough time that peaceful days would not vanish just because the calendar on the wall turned to a new month. He explained the document had already been signed off by the legal department. Asha read every line, circled dates with a pen, and asked for one sentence to be revised to make clear she did not have to leave until she had found suitable housing. Julian called Claire right there in front of her. The sentence was revised that same evening. Asha signed last, after Maya had already fallen asleep on the rug beside her notebook. She put the copy into the waterproof bag along with her daughter's birth certificate. There was no big smile, no long thank you. Only her shoulders lowering slightly, as if her body was finally allowing itself to set down part of a weight it had carried too long. That night was the first time the apartment truly belonged to the two of them, even if only through a temporary agreement. Maya still did not put her shoes in the closet. She placed the new pair against the edge of the bed, next to the old ones Asha had glued back together. The backpack sat on the blanket, zipper facing the door. When Asha told her she could hang her jacket on the hook, Maya held it in her hands for a few seconds, eyes on the empty closet as if it were a place that could swallow her things. "Are we still here tomorrow, Mom?" Asha knelt down, removing the backpack from her daughter's shoulder. She did not say they would stay forever. She only said that tomorrow morning Maya would wake up in this room, leave for school through this door, and come back to this exact place after childcare. That was enough for the child to let go of the jacket. Maya hung it on the lowest hook, then stepped back to look at it. An action so ordinary that most children never remember the first time they did it. But for Maya, it was the first mark she allowed herself to leave in a place that did not belong to a friend, a church, or a community center. Asha waited for her daughter to fall asleep, then went back to her own room. The bed had been made flat, 2 pillows placed side by side, though only one person would lie there. She turned off the light, but her body refused to relax. Every sound of pipes in the wall made her open her eyes. The elevator stopping out in the hallway made her hand instinctively search for the bag she usually kept tied to her wrist every night. She sat up, checked the door lock once, then again. In the next room, Maya lay at the very edge of the bed, leaving nearly half the mattress empty on the inside. After weeks of sharing a sofa, a fold-out bed, or a narrow mat, she had grown used to curling herself small. So her mother would have room to lie down, even now, facing a bed wide enough for a child to stretch out both arms. Asha pulled the blanket up over her daughter's shoulder. She meant to go back to her own room, but ended up sitting on the floor instead, back against the side of the bed. No one would knock on the door. No one would remind her of a time to leave. There was no alarm set for 5 o'clock to make her clean the room before someone else arrived. Close to dawn, Asha drifted off in that position. Maya woke first. She carefully climbed down, picked up the backpack from the bed, then began stuffing things into it. Pencil case, homework folder, pajamas, toothbrush. She moved slowly, trying not to make noise, just like the mornings at Harriet House when Asha had to clear everything away before the center opened. Asha woke to the sound of the zipper. She watched Maya fold the yellow sweater, place it on top, then press it down with both hands. The new shoes were already on her feet. The jacket hung up the night before was now over her arm. "Do we have to make the room look like no one was here before they come, Mom?" Asha sat still on the floor. For a few seconds, she could not make a single sound without her voice breaking. She looked at the bed already pulled nearly flat, the pillow set back neatly, and the 7-year-old trying to fit her entire life into one backpack before breakfast. Then Asha stood up. She took the jacket off Maya's arm and hung it back on the hook, took each item out of the backpack one by one, set the pencil case on the desk, left the toothbrush and the white cup in the bathroom, then folded the pajamas into the drawer. Maya stood watching, both hands still gripping the strap of the bag tightly. Asha zipped the backpack closed again. This time, only books and notebooks were left inside. She set it by the door, the place an ordinary backpack would sit before school, then knelt down to tie her daughter's shoelaces. Out in the hallway, Julian had just stepped out of the elevator, a training file in hand. He stopped in front of the door, not fully closed, when he heard Asha speak very softly. "You don't have to carry the whole house with you anymore." The words passed through the gap in the door and kept Julian standing still out in the hallway. He did not step in right away. A child could be given a bedroom in one afternoon, but it took many days, many months, before she would believe that room would not disappear when she woke up. Asha saw him when she opened the door to take Maya to school. She did not ask how much he had heard. Julian did not try to soften the moment with a word of comfort either. He simply handed over the file. Inside were 3 training programs, 2 childcare facilities with flexible hours and a signed transitional housing plan. Asha marked the housing management and property accounting program at a community college. The course ran 16 weeks, included hands-on practice, a final exam, and no promise of a job. That made her pause. She did not want to be placed in a seat just because Julian felt guilty. Before Douglas Court was bought out, Asha had already known how to read income and expense sheets, work with contractors, track rent, and explain leases to elderly residents. What she lacked was not ability. She lacked a credential solid enough for an employer to see her competence past the gap in her work history. "I'll apply." Julian made no promise she would be accepted. He only said tuition, transportation, and childcare would be covered during the transition period. The rest was for Asha to complete. 3 days later, she sat in her first class, arriving 19 minutes early and choosing a seat near an outlet. The room held people younger than her, a few who had already worked in the field for years. Asha wrote down every line, not because she did not understand, but because it had been so long since she had sat somewhere that a mistake would only cost her points, not cost her daughter a place to sleep. At Harrow Urban Holdings, the support program still met resistance. Martin Cole demanded the childcare portion be cut, arguing the company should only help with deposits. Julian put up a simple calculation on the screen. The common minimum wage in Massachusetts was $15 an hour. Working a full 40 hours a week for a year produced $31,200 in gross income, an average of $2,600 a month before tax. Meanwhile, the FMR for a 2-bedroom unit in the Boston-Cambridge-Quincy area was $2,941 a month. Rent alone already exceeded a worker's entire gross income before they bought food, paid for bus fare, phone service, or childcare. Julian looked around the room. How is a person supposed to try harder when the math is already negative before they even wake up for work? The board still did not agree to everything. They approved the fund with a lower budget than proposed and required a review after 6 months. Julian accepted the initial limits but refused to remove the childcare allowance. To keep it, he agreed to cut his own executive bonus and accept lower profit margins on 2 pilot projects. It was not a sacrifice that could make Julian poor, but it was the first time he let a principle of humanity cost him something valuable in the world that had raised him, the approval of powerful people. In the weeks that followed, Asha's life began to find a rhythm. In the mornings she took Maya to school. During the day she studied and practiced. In the afternoons Maya stayed at the center with Isaiah and Naya. In the evenings, the 2 of them ate in the South Boston kitchen, where the refrigerator gradually filled with things not prepared by the company. Black beans Asha cooked on weekends, greens, hot sauce, and containers of food dated in her own handwriting. Maya stopped pointing her shoes toward the door. By the 3rd week, she put her books on the shelf and hung 2 drawings on the refrigerator with magnets. The backpack was still packed the night before, but it no longer held a toothbrush or pajamas. Asha finished her first exam with the highest score in her cohort. She called Denise first, then Rochelle. The 2 of them brought a cake bought from the supermarket and stuck a candle in the middle, even though it was no one's birthday. Maya turned off the light. The whole kitchen sang a congratulations song for no particular occasion, and Asha laughed until she had to wipe her eyes. 16 weeks later, she walked out of her final exam with a result marked excellent. A nonprofit housing management organization invited her for an interview. Not because Julian's name appeared anywhere in her file, but because Asha had spotted a discrepancy in a maintenance cost sheet that the other candidates had missed. That same week, a 2-bedroom apartment in Roxbury was approved for the transitional program. It was a 12-minute bus ride from Maya's school. The lease was signed in Asha Bennett's name. The assistance was clearly time-limited, with the rent afterward to be covered by her own income once the job began. Julian stood out in the hallway the day the two of them received the keys. Maya held the small brass key in the palm of her hand. She touched it to the lock, then turned back to look at her mother. Asha nodded. Maya put the key in, turning it very slowly. The lock clicked open with a small dry sound. The door opened into a living room with old wood floors, a window looking down on a row of bare trees, and a dining table chipped at one corner. The apartment had no abstract paintings or square-folded towels like the corporate housing. Only a few pieces of second-hand furniture and 2 cardboard boxes in the middle of the room. But Asha's name was on the lease. Maya walked through the living room, opened each door, then stopped at the smaller bedroom. Inside was the old bed retrieved from storage, with a crescent-shaped scratch on the headboard and a star sticker still stuck at the foot. She said nothing. Maya placed her hand on the wood, then bent down to look underneath, as if to make sure every part of it was really there. That bed had once sat behind the storage unit door alongside the family photos, Asha's mother's cast iron pot, and the box of Christmas decorations. To anyone else, it was second-hand furniture. To the two of them, it was proof their life had not begun on the nights at Harriet House. Maya took off her backpack. This time she did not set it on the bed. She hung it on the hook behind the door, placed the poetry reading notice on the desk, then began opening the box of books. Julian sat out in the living room with a screwdriver, trying to fix a wobbling table leg. He did not step into the bedroom. There were moments when money and power should not appear in the middle of. 3 weeks later, Asha took a job as a resident coordinator at a nonprofit housing management organization. The interviewer did not know her whole story. They only saw the certificate, her past experience, and the way she explained that a delayed maintenance request was not just a number in a system. Sometimes it was a mother who could not bathe her child before school, or an elderly person forced to choose between waiting for a repairman and going to a doctor's appointment. The day she received her first paycheck, Asha bought cream-colored curtains for the living room, a low bookshelf for Maya, and a small potted plant to set by the window. Every item brought into the home had a reason to stay. Julian kept coming by, but no longer on any kind of check-in schedule. Some days he brought over a bookshelf, then spent nearly 2 hours reading the assembly instructions. Some days he stopped by to change a light bulb, then got held back by Maya because she needed someone to listen to her poem about doors. He attended the poetry reading on Friday morning. Maya stood 6th in line, both hands holding a sheet of paper already crumpled at the edges. The poem was about a house that knew how to wait. Not the most beautiful house or the biggest one. Just a place that did not turn off its lights when the person inside came home late. When Maya read the last line, Julian bent down and pretended to adjust his watch. Their life gradually got built out of things that never showed up in any report. Asha called Julian when the pipe under the sink leaked, not because she could not handle it herself, but because he had once said he wanted to learn how to fix something with his own hands. Julian bought the wrong washer, went back to the store a second time, then sat on the kitchen floor until almost 9 at night. Maya laid a towel down beside him and called it the construction zone. There were evenings they ate red beans and rice at the table that used to wobble. Julian learned not to ask Asha if she needed anything every time he came over. That question put her back in the position of having to prove a need. Instead, he washed dishes, took out the trash, or listened to Maya tell unimportant stories about school. 6 months after moving day, Asha set on the table the keys to the South Boston apartment, the completed copy of the transitional agreement, and the small notebook used since the very first night. Every expense from those first 24 hours was still recorded precisely. Date, time, amount, purpose. Beside the childcare payments for Isaiah and Nia, she had not written charity. She had written paying the help back. "I don't need you to prove anything," Julian said. Asha closed the notebook. She was not handing it over to prove she deserved anything. She handed it over because she did not want the rest of her life to begin from the position of someone who had once been checked on. She had received help, used it, and built the next part herself. Now she wanted to step out of the test under her own name. Julian took the keys but left the notebook on the table. From his bag, he took out a proposal to establish a housing stability program. The advisory board section listed names of a lawyer, a financial expert, and an operations director. None of them had ever slept borrowed on someone's sofa. None of them knew where a child would keep her toothbrush when she did not believe she'd be allowed to stay until morning. Asha read all of it, then took a pen and underlined the section on authority. She required that people who had actually experienced losing housing be given a real vote. No family should be forced to recount their worst days in front of the media in order to receive a deposit, childcare, or a room with a lock. Julian signed beneath the revision. From the bedroom, Maya came running out with a paper folded in four. She opened it on the table. Inside was a house drawn in brown crayon, 3 windows and 3 ink dots standing side by side beneath the roof. Asha looked at the third dot but did not ask. Maya folded the paper back up, handed it to Julian, then pointed at his inner jacket pocket, the one that used to hold only business cards, credit cards, and the things used to open doors that never belonged to anyone else. Julian put the paper house inside it. The thin sheet touched the jacket lining, light enough that he almost couldn't feel it. But from that day on, it stayed with him through every budget meeting, every negotiation with investors, and every time someone used the word risk to describe families who had never had enough for a deposit. 2 years later, the first housing stability program opened in Roxbury, inside an old brick building once proposed for sale to a luxury apartment project. The ground floor held an intake room, a small childcare area, free washing machines, and a kitchen that always had hot coffee. The upper floors held 8 transitional apartments for families who needed time to find work, complete paperwork, or wait for a long-term lease. There was no glass counter separating people asking for help from staff. No plastic chairs lined up under white fluorescent light. On the wall was a list of what the program could do: deposit assistance, after-school childcare, phone restoration, transportation costs, job application support, and housing counseling. At the bottom was a line Asha had written: no one should have to recount their worst days to prove they deserve to be safe. On opening day, reporters crowded the entrance. The communications team had prepared a long speech, one where Julian's name appeared more often than the program's own name. He read it in the car, then left it on the seat. When he stepped up to the podium, Julian carried only a small piece of paper. He said Harrow Urban Holdings had once made decisions that were legal but not fair. A company could follow every clause and still harm a family. He did not tell the story of having saved Asha. He acknowledged that it was Asha who had forced him to see what the spreadsheet had left out. Julian also said the program could not erase the months Maya had once slept with a backpack on her shoulders. No amount of funding could buy back the mornings a child packed up a room as if she had never been there. The only thing they could do was make sure the families who came after did not have to walk the same road just to be seen as deserving. In the front row, Asha sat beside Denise and Rochelle. Denise had kept her job at the nursing home. Rochelle had become a shift manager at the grocery store. Their children were still enrolled in the same after-school program, the one where that year's payment had carried both mothers through the gap before their first paychecks. Maya sat between Isaiah and Naya. She was 9 now, taller than before, and still kept the little house-shaped keychain on her backpack. The paint on the roof had worn off completely, but Maya did not want to replace it. After the speech, Asha did not stand in front of the cameras. She went into the intake room to check what still needed finishing. A box of tissues running low. A printer not connected to the right network. The childcare room's nameplate hanging crooked. She fixed each thing with the same focus that had once kept Douglas Court running through years when no one thought that work was worth keeping. Julian found her standing on a chair, straightening the nameplate. Opening day and you're still fixing things. Asha stepped down, brushing off her hands. Her eyes settled on the intake area, where a young mother was filling out a form with 2 children sitting close beside her. The woman wore a restaurant uniform, one sleeve still carrying the smell of cooking oil. The bag at her feet was zipped shut, and the older child kept her jacket on, even though the room was quite warm. Asha recognized those signs before anyone else did. She pulled up a chair and sat down at eye level with the mother. She did not ask where she had slept the night before, did not ask why the savings had run out. Asha started with what could be solved right away: which school the children attended, what time school let out, whether the phone still worked, where the paperwork was, and whether the family had somewhere safe to go that night. The woman tried to keep her voice steady, but her hands gripped the pen until her knuckles went white. When a staff member brought out a temporary set of keys, she looked at them without reaching out to take them. The hesitation was exactly like Asha's own, back when gratitude always had to stand beside the fear that any gift might come with a test attached. Asha set the keys on the table, without pushing them toward her. "You don't have to decide everything today." After saying that, she showed the 2 children a room with books, crayons, and a low cabinet for storing backpacks. The younger one stepped in first. The older one still stood beside her mother. The strap of her bag wound around her wrist. At the end of the hallway, Maya pinned the old paper house up on the bulletin board. The sheet had been pressed flat, the 3 ink dots beneath the roof still clear. A newly arrived girl stared at it for a long time, then asked who the 3rd dot was. Before Maya could answer, the outer door opened. Cold air came in with a father carrying a sleeping child on his shoulder, his other hand pulling 2 mismatched suitcases. The intake staff member stood up. Julian stepped over to hold the door. Asha took another set of keys from the drawer, while Maya reached out to steady the child's backpack so the father could step inside. And in that moment, the room was no longer a place people had to come to prove how much they had suffered. It became a place where one person held the door, one person handed over the keys, one child steadied a backpack, and no one had to lower their head for having needed help. What Asha taught Julian was never only in the money she had spent. It was in the way she remembered every single person who had carried her through a hard day. In the way people who had little still shared a seat, a ride, a few hours of childcare, and a door left unclosed. Sometimes, what saves a family is not a gift that changes everything in one night. It is a stretch of time long enough for a mother to catch her breath, a place safe enough for a child to set a toothbrush in a cup, a chance given without judgment attached. And dignity is not a test the poor must pass to receive those most basic things. How do you feel about Asha, Maya, and Julian's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you or someone you know once received help at the hardest possible moment, this story might carry a little more hope to someone who needs to hear it today. Thank you for staying until the very end and listening to this story. See you in the next one.